Welcome to Moderna Museet. It's a true pleasure to see you all here. Fantastic. And we have our guests of honor waiting outside, and they are, of course, two persons, one artist, Gilbert and George. And they will sit here and have a discussion together with Hans Ulrich Obrist, who is one of the curators of the show, which you're going to see in a while. And I'm very happy to stand in front of you just to introduce you to this, and I will just hand over the microphone to Ulf Eriksson, a colleague of mine, who will give you some practical information. And then we have Hans Ulrich Obrist, artistic director of Serpentine, among many other things, together with the artist Gilbert and George. So, please, Ulf.
Thank you very much, Ann-Sophie. My name is Ulf Eriksson, and I'm a curator at the Learning Department here at the Moderna Museet. I'm very happy to see so many of you here tonight for this afternoon's program. Gilbert and George in conversation with Hans Ulrich Obrist. The exhibition will open for the public tomorrow, but we are very happy to be able to give you an opportunity to a sneak peek even tonight. So after the talk, you are welcome up in the exhibition, and it will be open until 7:30 tonight. This conversation will be documented and published on the Moderna Museet YouTube channel. So please make sure to subscribe, and you will get an update when it's published. Without further ado, now I would like to give a warm welcome to Gilbert and George and Hans Ulrich Obrist.
Ladies and gentlemen, friends and fellow travelers, good evening, and thank you so much for these warm words of introduction. And before we start, I wanted to ask you all to give another very warm welcome to Gilbert and George. Of course, all my thanks also to Daniel Birnbaum, with whom we've curated this exhibition over the last couple of years, and also to Maya Hoffmann and the Luma Foundation, where the exhibition initiated in Arles, in the south of France. And it's an exhibition which has literally only just begun. It's very exciting that it begins today here in Stockholm. The show will then continue also in Reykjavik and in Oslo. There is a separate exhibition also happening in Finland, and that is just the beginning of this very, very long tour. From the very beginning, when we discussed with Daniel and the different museums how to actually structure this exhibition, Gilbert and George suggested this idea that we would really go decade by decade, because there are so many amazing work in every decade. And so I thought today, for the conversation, we could somehow make it a journey through time. And I wanted to begin with the very first question, really, how it all began, how you came to art, how art came to you, and if you can tell us a little bit about your first works, because you told us that these first works were actually exhibitions, that there were exhibitions like a very special project in Frank's Sandwich Bar in London. It would be great to hear about your beginnings.
Very good. I think it all starts off when two boys from the country end up at the art school, St. Martin's School of Art, in London in 1967. It was the age when everyone said we were living in the permissive society. It was a time of swinging London and anything goes and free love. But we weren't part of that at all, because we were well-behaved country, lower-class people. We weren't the middle-class students who were going crazy with drugs and drink and rock and roll and sex. We were very well-behaved, and we wanted very much to succeed.
It was quite exciting, because After all, I come from the mountains, so I always wanted to be an artist. I remember when I was 7 years old, I wanted to be an artist. So when I was 14 years old, I went to the first art school for 3 years. That was in the Dolomites. And then the vicar told me I should go to Austria to progress my idea of art. So I went to Holland for 1 year, and that didn't felt I couldn't go anywhere. So I had this idea of Munich. Oh, Munich is very exciting. So I went there, I stayed 6 years in the Academy of Art, and even that I realized I was not becoming an artist. So I saw this extraordinary exhibition of English art in a gallery in Munich. It was Heiner Friedrich Gallery, and that I had a vision to go to London. And when I went to London, for me, it felt like going to the moon. And it was extraordinary. And by accident, I managed to get into the school that was the most famous art school in the world at that time, St. Martin's School of Art. And who did I meet there? George.
Ooh. It's very simple because our generation, we are both war babies. We came out of the Second World War, and I grew up with everyone around us, the family and friends, only knew one thing: things will get better. And they did. It was extraordinary. We do believe even today that the world is an extraordinary privileged triumph. It's never before have so many people had so much opportunity and so many advantages. It's an enormous success. And our world, the Western world, the world of Europe, North America, Australasia, a few outposts as well, is the real success. And we believe that success is a cultural one. It's not because of the police station, it's not because of the church, it is because of all of the music our grandparents did or did not listen to, the books our grandparents did or did not read. We are a cultural success. And we know that because if we go outside of that world, we will not be safe and we won't be free. So culture has made us safe and free. It's an enormous triumph. And whenever some of our younger friends grumble about life or events, we say that's extremely ungrateful. You just have to remember all of those people who worked so hard and died and went to prison and got executed in order to arrange this amazing utopian existence. And of course, the one thing that is always true is there is room for improvement. And we're all working on that.
Thank you so much. And actually, one thing which is important, because you talked about this time, at college, but then when you actually left college, there was this epiphany of you basically deciding that you were one artist. And you told me, and Daniel, in this conversation, we did a very long conversation for the catalog. You told us there that it was all about being artists without the usual arrangements.
Yes, it was quite exciting because in 1967, 68, we had to leave the art school. It was the end of the line to be happy art students. So we ended up in the streets of London with not a studio and just wanted to be art and nothing, wanted to be artists and nothing else. So we had this amazing vision ourselves that walking the streets of London, we could be the art. And it was a revolution, and we are still the same. We put on our responsibility suits of our art, and forever we are the mad vicars.
So we always think it's something that we didn't think of or decide or talk about. It's something that came over us, like a change in the weather, changes the mood. So in some way, it's like a pantomime or a folk story of two country boys in this amazing London town without any money and no studio and wandering the streets of London and being amazed by the tube stations and the railway stations and the police stations and the palaces and the department stores and the hotels and the shops and the markets and the streets and the river with the boats and the parliament and all this amazing world. And we loved it. We realized that we had to become part of the urban life. We didn't want to go back to the idea of the country. We felt that somehow or other we had to become urban artists. And I think at the very, very beginning, most of our pictures are involved a little bit with nature, because we couldn't get the nature out from inside of ourselves. Only in, maybe with the Red Morning pictures and then with the Dirty Words pictures, we became real modern city artists. And then one day we made maybe a slight mistake, because we'd forgotten about what we'd escaped from. And a friend invited us down to the country, to a small village in North Devon. And so we went down to see him, and we got up the next morning because it was so quiet. We were almost woken up by the silence. And we walked up this little lonely high street with the estuary at the bottom with these beautiful birds swooping down. And you could hear, it was so quiet, you could hear the insects in the hedgerows. And we passed the early morning postman, and it all seemed so idyllic and so beautiful. Nature, so peaceful. It reminded me of our school hymn, "Here in the country's heart, where the grass is green, life is the same sweet life as it e'er hath been." And we came to the top of the village, and there was the medieval parish church, built in the 12th century and then added to a very beautiful Gothic building, with the tombstones and the flowers and the weeds. And in front of the gates of the churchyard, to make the perfect scene, there was a young couple, a boy and a girl, with a pram, with a sleeping baby. And we were almost in tears at this perfection of utopian country beauty. And we said to the young couple, "Good morning." And the young man turned to us and said, "Fuck off, you weird-looking cunts." and then we knew what nature. Then we knew what nature is.
We had to stay in the city, but it was extraordinary.
I do come back to the city.
We haven't been back since. Get out of the water.
And to come back to the city, I wanted to ask you about the kind of first gallery show, the first exhibition. And one of the only words I know in Swedish is God jul. I think it means Merry Christmas. And it's very interesting that actually your first gallery show was a Christmas show in 1968 in Robert Fraser's gallery. And I always think it's interesting to hear about the first show artists do. Can you tell us about
it? It was quite exciting because at that time was the period of experiment. We are trying to find a good way how to become really artists. But I think the most important part of our life was when we discovered the record underneath the arches.
Yes, when these two country boys were wandering in London, as I was saying, and we came across the tube station and the railway station of Euston. And then behind Euston, we found a utopian housing estate from the early 20th century with white stucco and gaily painted front doors. And in front of the flats, there were gardens with flower beds. And there were washing lines for hanging out washing. And they had washing poles, wooden poles, to support the washing lines. And on the top of the poles, there were huge ceramic birds, a different bird on every pole. They were commissioned by the architect from Royal Dilton. So it was an amazing, dreamlike, perfect, wonderful place to live. And in front of the gardens, there were retail units. There was one with washing machines, there was a liquor store, a tobacconist and newsagent shop, and then a wonderfully mysterious shop which sold all of the things that the caretaker of the flats would give the shop when someone leaves their flat. Everyone leaves something behind when you leave your house or your flat. So there were some tatty old paperback books, a saucepan with the handle rattling insecurely, and a lampshade with a hunting scene, and a lot of all the detritus, the unloved, unwanted objects of existence. And amongst them we found a gramophone record, and the title of the song was Underneath the Arches. And we knew what that meant because we lived in Spitalfields and we were surrounded by 3 huge hostels which were places for damaged men to live. Many of them were very elderly and been damaged by the First World War. More were not so old and been damaged by the Second World War or the Korean War. And a huge section of them had been damaged by the sex laws, which said at that time, if you committed some minor sexual misdemeanor, the police would say, if you're not here tomorrow morning, we can't charge you. Which meant you would pack a little case, you would have to leave, you wouldn't be able to say goodbye to anyone because of the shame. And of course, you only gravitate towards capital cities. So many of these tramps were in these huge hostels. and that was like underneath the arches for us. We took the record home, and we found a friend who had an old wind-up gramophone player, and put the record on, and we were amazed by the words, because they were so much like our life was. And it's very much like our interest now in another way. And the words were, the Ritz I never sigh for, the Carlton they can keep. There's only one place that I know, and that is where I sleep. Underneath the arches, I dream my dreams away. Underneath the arches, on cobblestones we lay. Every night you'll find me, tired out and worn, happy when the daylight comes creeping, heralding the dawn. Sleepy when it's raining, and sleeping when it's fine. La dee 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 da 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 da. Pavement is my pillow, no matter where we rain. Underneath the arches, I dream my dreams away. And there we found art.
And that was the most important thing we ever did, because after that we became the art. We became the emotional artwork, not like a stone, not a piece of marble, not like a piece of bronze, but humanity took over for us in the art. And that changed the whole idea of art forever for us. We know that when we were art students, all the art was minimal at that time, no? And we were able to make a human art for ourselves, and it was a revolution for us. We are still carrying on doing that. An art that has emotion and has a morality behind it.
It gave us the moral dimension, the fire and the truth and the beauty and the power of culture. And we realized that we were able to deal and be active in the fields that lie inside all of us, wherever we live on the planet, whatever our educational background, whatever our religious beliefs, we would be able to deal in some way with death,
Hope,
life,
fear,
sex,
money,
race,
and religion.
and shitty,
Naked
human,
world.
all of the content of mankind and its progress and the success story.
Yet we realized that we were having this journey towards the end, no? What do you call we have this book in England called The Pilgrim's Progress, no? And it is not a very famous book, but the journey from human persons towards the end and what he finds in front of us all the time, you know, like all the devils, all the good, all the bad, all the stuff. And we have to fight, because our art is not based on looking outside, what it is. It's all looking inside yourself, how life feels like being alive today. It's always a vision is inside you and not outside. Outside will stay forever roughly the same, but in the inner thought is full of contradiction, full of complexity, like we all are, human people.
That's why when we create a picture, we always try to make it part of the past, present, and future. It has to be those three elements. That's why Gilbert mentioned The Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan, the least read, most famous, most published book in the world, probably. And we did actually read it recently. It's quite very beautiful book. But we are 300 or 400 yards from where he is buried, and in the same cemetery, William Blake is buried, and Daniel Defoe is buried. Which one gets flowers? Which one alone gets flowers? Any guesses? William Blake, of course. And then very near that cemetery, another 100 yards, is the burial place of Fox, the founder of the Quakers. And very near that is the burial place of the Wesley brothers, who founded the second biggest group of Christians in the world today. We're also within walking distance of the Anglican church at the end of our street, which has, when you enter the church, there isn't a cross, there isn't a Jesus, there is a royal coat of arms to remind you when you enter that this is the Church of England, not the Church of Rome. At the other end of the street, we have the French Huguenot church, which closed down after a while and became the synagogue. That closed down after a while and is now a mosque. We wonder what will be next. It's difficult to guess.
And we are in the middle there, the secularists.
We have our
The
church in the middle.
non-believers are in the middle.
And we have the German church at the end of Brick Lane. And then a little bit further along the road, we have the very superior Portuguese synagogue, which is very active. On Brick Lane, there is the address. The building's not there. The address where Oscar Wilde went to smoke opium. And the whole district is named Spitalfields because it was the place for returning crusaders from the Holy Land who were damaged to come to recuperate, the Spittal Fields. So we know we're surrounded by an amazing history of all kinds, and that's part of our past and will be part of our present and future. We like to think about it in that way.
And then I visited you for the very first time as a teenager, and I came to London. It was a pilgrimage to visit you in your house in Fournier Street. You told me to read Bunyan's book, but you also...
And you know, Oscar Wilde, when he was in prison, they gave him that book to read.
It was the only non-scriptural book he was allowed.
And you also, at that time, so you showed me this book. There was a color test.
Yes.
Which you made us do. And also, we talked about postal sculptures. And of course, you described so beautifully the epiphany of the singing sculpture, which is so important. Another very epiphany is, of course, art for all. And very important, today we quote it every day, we need art for all. Can you tell us a little bit about where that came from, where the epiphany of art for all
I think it came very simply from our realization that we were surrounded by art students and art teacher who were determined to be willfully obscure in order to feel superior. So the fewer people could understand, the more big-headed and superior they felt. And we felt that, like in any other profession, you should be able to create something which can address the human person. We say if you break your leg, you know where the doctor in the hospital is. If you get mugged on the London Underground, you know where the police station is. But we are not made up just of the flesh and the skin and bone. We have a soul, and the soul has to be nurtured and cared for and developed. And we do that through reading poetry and books and cinema and going to exhibitions. There is the element of the soul. We believe in that.
But it was quite exciting at the beginning because in 69 we were experimenting in different way how to approach the public, the person. So we used to do what called postal sculpture that we used to send out to different the art world, and because we were telling the story how we as human sculptors were posing ourselves in front of the window and drinking tea while it was snowing outside. So we were able to make an emotional human sculpture, and we sent it out, and it was extraordinary success. And after that, we started to find another way to make art. We did these big drawings that everybody seemed to love, and we realized we didn't want that. We didn't want a drawing that looks back. It felt like somebody else did it. The mother of Rembrandt or something like that. So we stopped doing that, and then we found our own language that we are still using now, the negative, the image that is the negative, that's very powerful, very direct, and it was a new language that we invented for ourselves. And that's what you see when you see the show tonight. You will see all that new language. And it's us, the living sculptors, in the middle of it, and we are projecting these feelings towards the wall, all the inside, all the complexity of life that is inside. We are shooting on the walls and makes them more and more relevant for ourselves and for the audience, because we only love the audience. We are not interested in art. We all want the audience to be able to understand what we are trying to do, and that everything is dedicated to the audience.
But it's interesting also because many more questions I have then about this language you described. But before that, there was another epiphany in 1978, because you were involved with the art world and artists until then, but something happened all of a sudden in 1978. You stopped being involved in basically socializing in the art world. You even stopped going in 79 to the cinema.
We stopped everything overnight. We were friends and party goers and drinking and extraordinary in London and Paris, New York. We had an enormous circle of friends, and we realized that we didn't want that social contact. So from that day onwards, we vowed not to go into people's houses and not to go to art world parties and not to have friends in that way. We didn't need it. It was much better without. It was better for them, better for them as well.
But it was so simple, because it was very interesting. Because when we did the singing sculpture in Düsseldorf with Konrad Fischer range, that we think he gave us the biggest opportunity to be artists. And after that, he said to us, "Why don't you leave something behind in my gallery?" You know? And we did these 3 drawings called walking, viewing, and relaxing. You know? There were 3 big drawings, and we were quite excited, and we didn't think too much about it. And so we had a show, and next day he sold them, and £1,000, and it was a fortune, because you could buy a house for £8,000. And after that, we got very excited about it. And so what did we do? We started to do the drinking sculptures every night. And then we did the real drinking pieces for many, many years. And we started to go out and entertain us all the nightclubs, dancing away the whole night, the full explode and stuff. Everything was art for us. No? The dancing, the drinking, and what became all G&G, the suits, responsibility suits of our art were all dancing away the night away. And we managed to do amazing shows. And we were excited. And then we did stopping in 79, we stopped.
Yeah. And then we got confirmation of our art for all belief, because we had one of the first shows at a gallery again in Germany. And it was a very successful evening. We sold 1 or 2 pictures. We had lots of drinks and a big dinner, and everyone was thrilled. And we came into the gallery the next day, and there was Konrad Fischer looking very grumpy and very miserable. And we asked him if he had a hangover, and he said no, he didn't have a hangover. So we said, "What's the matter?" "Ooh," he wouldn't tell us. I said, "Tell us what's wrong. Why aren't you cheerful as usual?" He said, "Oh, the cleaning lady, she likes your exhibition." That's a very 70s story. Thankfully, the art world is not quite so much like that now, but I'm afraid it still is a little bit like that. We like that people know our art. We like that they understand. We like that they feel part of the story. We don't feel that we know something that we can tell the viewer. We don't feel we know something more than the viewer. We think we're exploring life and art together with the viewer. We feel we're walking down a road hand in hand with the viewer of art. We define our art as the friendship that is formed between the viewer and the picture. That's where it is. That is the essence of our art. So when people know us in different, people stop us on the street and say they love our art, invariably they've never seen an exhibition. We have a huge following amongst people who somehow or other reach our art not through exhibitions, and we're fascinated by that. Recently we decided to add to our slogan, Art for All, a new one, because all of those tramps, those damaged people, have long gone. And they've been replaced, not in a similar quantity, but with great similarities, by a younger group of people who are drug addicted. And they are very thin, and they're very poor, and they're very miserable, and very ragged, and very dirty, and very desperate. And they're a quarter of our age, but nearer to death than we are. And we still are fascinated that they have some understanding of our art, and we are very moved by that. They know that we have one favorite who looks like a wonderful painting by a Spanish artist I can always forget the name of. He's very thin, has a wonderful profile, he's extraordinarily thin. And he came up to us the other day and said that he loved our art. And my mum loved your art, but she's dead now. Extraordinary. To be able to have contact with people who are so desperate as that.
But also that many people see your work, and not only through exhibitions, has of course to do with the books. And in a way, books are a very important medium for you. And there's a book was published, of course, for the exhibition here also. The idea is always the books are very accessible. You make sure that these catalogs are affordable for students. I always remember when I was like 16 years old, growing up in Switzerland, you had the big exhibition at Jean-Christophe Amann's Kunsthalle in Basel, and the catalogue was something like 5 Swiss francs. So I could buy it as a 16-year-old. Otherwise I couldn't have bought it. And in a way, that idea of art for all through your books, you also invented a whole, you've inspired generations of graphic designers and designers through your books, because you always design them yourselves. Can you tell us a bit about that?
We always started in 1969 to design everything, invitation card. And we did a first book in 1970 what's the name? Caspar Koenig knocked on our door and asked us to do a little book. So we did a little book that is called Side by Side. And we had an additional 600, and it was fantastic. And after that, we did 1980. We did the first real catalog, designed every page by us. But the one that you're talking about in '84, when the big show was in Basel, that was extraordinary because we asked publisher if they would contribute or do or pay or something like that, and nobody wanted to be involved. So we took our own money and published 24,000 copies.
Unheard of at that time. Yes.
And it is
great
a
success.
book that is as fat as that.
Yeah,
It was extraordinary. And still, even like then, we did what they call the 10-kilo one that we designed for the Tate Modern, or 10 kilos, can you imagine? And that was an extraordinary success, 13,000 copies. Everybody walking, crippling themselves this book.
I think so many people probably come to our art through seeing catalogues at friends' houses during a party or a family gathering. It's extraordinary that we're able to reach out in that way.
It's quite interesting because big shows, all the museums, they want you down all the time. But not the books. They work day and night, the books. And posters work day and night. Even when we have the big shows like in London with White Cube, we try to arrange another system to involve ordinary people with poster. Last time we printed 5,000 posters at White Cube Gallery, and we signed them all. We sold 5,000 posters. And that is a revolution. That's an art show outside the ordinary art world.
I like the badges, we've distributed and keep distributing through the show we do called Take Me On.
Yes.
There's been more than 1 million of your badges have been distributed.
We saw people wearing them here even during the days we've been here.
Now
We have. They were, are there 8 badges or 6 badges? It's ban religion, burn that book, fellatio for all, make cunnilingus compulsory.
And it's the other one, fuck the planet. That's another
Fuck the
one.
planet. No, they're a great success, the badges.
Now, it's an exhibition called Take Me, I'm Yours, where every artist does actually an artwork for dissemination, and people can take it away.
Yes.
We did it for the first time in '95 at the Serpentine. This was one of our earlier collaborations. But I wanted to come back to something you said before about the language, that you invented this language, this extraordinary language we can see here in the exhibition. And in the conversation Daniel and I did with you in the catalogue, we discussed that moment when you invented that. And you said that you realized that you can't show a single photograph in a gallery because then you become a photographer. So in a way, that led you to to invent this system which allows you to do very monumental works, and yet at the same time, very much as Marcel Duchamp said, the museum should be portable. They are very portable. Can you tell us about the moment you had this epiphany?
I think it's because we are sculptors who are creating pictures. We are not trained as picture makers. So we started, it was just black and white because the negative is black and white. It took us 3 years to find red, and another year to find yellow, and then 2 years, and then we used full color. So we had to find our own visual language, and that has evolved together with the meanings as our concerns change and evolve. So really our pictures as a whole are not a stylistic development, they're a human development and evolution of a life. So we're young baby artists remembering childhood, thinking of the tramps going to college. It's the same evolution as the viewer. It's the life of the artist and the life of the viewer together.
But we had so many subjects. Now, when we found this, what you call the form to speak for ourselves, like the drinking pieces. Then we went to Japan and we did the cherry blossom pieces because we were fascinated about this cherry blossom in the spring in Japan of falling down. So I remind everybody of the first, the soldiers who is dying. The soldiers who go to the front and dies. He is like a cherry blossom who falls down and is dead. And then we did the mental piece, and then we did the red morning. We realized that London or everybody were the communist cloud came over us in some way. That's why we did the red morning. Then we did
the dirty words pictures.
The dirty words piece, very extraordinary. And then we did the cosmological piece, new democratic picture, naked shit pictures, jack freak pictures, scapegoating pictures, beard pictures, Christian pictures, remember? So there's all these subjects that are inside that we are struggle in some way, and we want to shoot out towards the public. But even we realize it's a very modern form. When you see the show, it is a language that is like you walk into a big shop in some way. It's not like a language of art when you see all the time colors rubbed into on the canvas more and more. It's modern. It's a new way of speaking.
And something also happened which one can see here in the show very clearly is that at a certain moment you left the house. And I was friendly with this photographer, Lucien Hervé. He was in his 80s, even 90s when I knew him. In Paris, he was the photographer of Le Corbusier. And he always said, Paris seen from my window. So he never really left his apartment. He's, for many years, created this photography. And in a way, it's very fascinating because a lot of your work happened in the house and had to do with the house. And then at a certain moment, as you told me, you left the house. You opened the door and you went. Can you tell us about what happened? That's something which leads us to the 80s.
We opened the window and took images from the window down, that first sun.
We took the first images of people from the window because we weren't trained as picture makers. If we'd been trained as picture makers, we would know how to have a couch in the studio and to have models. But I think in general we have a different system of actually making the pictures.
But the person, when we take an image of a person, they have to be a special person. It can never be something, rich or poor. It has to be in between, something.
I think we're not trying to show life or reflect life. We prefer to think that we are forming our tomorrows, that the world and the viewers will be a little bit different because of the pictures we created.
Not only that, but the whole world has changed totally. From 1969 to now, it's extraordinary. Just the art world is just so big. I don't know if it's a good idea, but anyway, it's very big. It's extraordinary. And you can travel the world, you can phone all over the world, you can go anywhere. Even like London is a place where I don't know how many restaurants, different food and all that stuff. So it is like cosmology of the world in some way is in East End of London where we live. You just open the door and the whole world is there. We don't have to go anywhere to be inspired. We don't want to be inspired because we want only the inspiration is inside ourselves.
And of course, in the 80s, so you go, out of the house, first the window, and then out of the house. And in the 80s, it's not only that the artwork gets bigger, but your pictures suddenly become much, much bigger. And I think one of the great things in the process of working on this show was to kind of revisit also all these amazing works from the 80s, which many of those were actually in the Basel show, which was the first show.
Oh, yes.
I saw the new moral works, this gigantic group of pictures you did in the 80s. Can you tell us about that?
Like Drunk with God. We did one big one that is now in, I think, in Cologne Museum.
And it's also very important to remember that it's the art that stays still and the world changes. When we did the Dirty Words pictures in 1977, many of our friends and supporters and champions thought that finally Gilbert and George had gone over the top, that they were being rather silly and very childish, and the world doesn't need pictures like queer, shit, bent cunt, fucked up. They thought it's completely unnecessary and really quite silly. But 25 years later, when they were gathered together, entirely together for the first time at the Serpentine Gallery, the show was an enormous success, and many of those people from the 77 who'd been very against the pictures were there at the grand opening and saying, marvellous, wonderful exhibition, tremendous. And we said, thank you very much, but surely you remember being rather against these pictures in 1970. No, I've always loved them, because they would never remember that they'd been against. It shows that the pictures stay the same, bent, shit, cunt, all there, but the world has changed to accommodate them. That's what culture does. It makes room for itself.
But a revolution for us became when we were able to accept the whole Darwinian idea of no God. No, that was for us extraordinary.
That's why we're very interested in the details of religion. We felt in 1980 that it was silly to ignore religion, as a lot of modern artists felt they were superior and atheist, and going to church was probably something the servants do, but they were better than that. And so we started to include religious images in our pictures. And even then, the art world thought that was very silly, that we don't need religion, we don't need a picture with Christ in or so, or church, that we're beyond that, we're sophisticated. And now, of course, today we know that religion is more important now, even more important now than it was then.
Religious wars.
More people are murdering and killing each other because of religion than then.
Religious wars are going on all the time, and we did a lot of we did these banners that were like ban religion in some way, and that's all our art. We're quite anti-religion in a big way in some way, because we should believe in man-made religions. They're all man-made. That was much better to accept as us as human beings, that we are in charge of ourselves as humans, not fake gods.
Or as our favorite Indian restaurateur says, I don't believe in all these man-made gods. I'm a Muslim. but we do believe in the details of religion. We have every evening we have a minicab back from the restaurant we go to, and they're very nice young Kurdish minicab drivers, and they're absolutely charming. We like them very much, and their delightful appearance and their delightful manner is belied entirely by their beliefs, which are incredibly horrible and offensive and disgusting. But we stick with them because it's very learning. It's good to hear it firsthand, prejudice of that kind, and they're very amusing as well. We have one called Arrow, who's very good looking and very nice, and is a friend of ours as well as a driver. And one night during Ramadan, he was moaning slightly about the complications of Ramadan, when to have a glass of water and when the next meal is because of sun up or sundown, and that it was becoming rather a bore. So I said, so when is it over? He said, Thursday at noon it'll be all over. So I said, oh great, so then you can go back to normal, smoking cigarettes and masturbating. He said, I don't smoke. So you see there's fun in religion as well.
Now you mentioned the banners, the famous banners, and that's almost like a ritual because we have these marathons at the Serpentine in London where we every year have a different theme, and then we would invite artists and architects and scientists, practitioners from all disciplines to address that theme. And of course, the banners were created for one of these marathons.
Yes, it's all your idea. We blame him.
But
We blame him, yes.
What you also created for the marathon are these lists, which we actually have here in the exhibition in the museum. And
Here we have
the philosophy that we did
Can
in.
you tell us about, because it's interesting, the list, because from the very beginning in your work there are lists, and I mean there's a whole literature movement in the 60s. It's not a movement actually, it's a kind of an association of poets. They never had a manifesto, founded by a mathematician called Le Lyonnais, together with Georges Perec, Harry Matthews. It's called Oulipo. And that's a kind of a poetry of lists. And you have a lot of lists in your art. Can you tell us about your lists and these lists, particularly here in Stockholm?
I think the philosophy is the leading one at the moment, because we realized that everybody knows what philosophy is, even if in countries where there's never been a philosopher. We all know roughly what it means. It would be difficult for most people to describe what that form is, and maybe somebody has the odd book on philosophy in the house. We probably don't know where in our regular bookshop the philosophy section is even, and we thought we would try to make a more accessible part of that area of life. So we carried cards with us day and during dinner, and every night we wrote down more added to the philosophy until it became this. We think it's a great work of literature. In fact, it's an amazing modern form, the philosophy. And when we finished the philosophy, we realized that there was something else to do, and that would be the godology, which we're writing at the moment. It's already nearly 5,000
godologies are going on at the moment. And it was quite exciting when we had this big, what you call, talk at the Alexander Palace in London. No? It is a place where ordinary people came. We were amazed because they asked us to do a talk there, and there were 700 people there. And we did one page of philosophy, just one little page. What happened there later?
And then after the talk we had a book signing, and 100 nice, middle-class, educated, well-dressed people queued up and said things like, "It's for my wife, I love her so much. Could you write fuck, 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 please?" Nearly everyone wanted something like that. It was as though they were throwing off chains or being thrilled to do something different that evening from every other evening in their life. It was charming.
It was quite extraordinary. We had a small show in south of London, where they asked us about the buttocks.
In Brighton.
In Brighton, we had a small show there, and we had some big pictures there, like in the shit and stuff like that. And we had to entertain all these not old, but 40-year-old ladies, and they all wanted to be photographed in front of the naked shit picture, all the time, and wanted the buttocks in it as well. And that is extraordinary revolutionary for us, that you see the ordinary people want to liberate themselves in an amazing way, that we are able to accept more than less. I think that's important.
We like the occasions when we realize we're able to prove art for all, that we're able to reach people who wouldn't normally be affected in any way by art. I remember when we did an exhibition of the naked shit pictures at the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam. And we went over for the opening, and it was an enormous success, the opening. And the next day we were free in the afternoon, so we had the chance to take a lovely stroll in the sunlight of the Amsterdam. We walked through Amsterdam, and then by chance we found ourselves walking down the street, which has these buildings which have the live sex shows. And outside each of the places there's a man trying to get you in. So we just passed and we heard a man saying, "Live fucky show starts in 5 minutes, only €4. Live fucky show. So good morning Gilbert, good morning George. Starts in 10 minutes, 5 guilders only." So we made it. We got it. We made it.
Now you talked about or brought back the art for art thing. It's interesting because Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web in 1989, a world-changing invention. And it's, of course, in a couple of weeks, it's the 30th anniversary. I think on the 13th of March, I just had a conversation with him a couple of weeks ago about it. And so it will be on the 13th of March, the 30th anniversary of the World Wide Web. And of course, Tim Berners-Lee is very concerned about what's happening to the World Wide Web because he sees the potential loss of net neutrality, because he always wanted the World Wide Web to be for everyone, and he doesn't want to have a faster internet for those who pay and a slower internet for those who can't pay. So anyway, in a way it's interesting that he talks about this is for everyone, and you talk about art for all, and it brings us to the question of the digital, because one of the things which I was thinking also this afternoon, walking in the exhibition, a really major change in the practice in your work was the arrival of the digital, the computer entering the studio. And I wanted to ask you to tell us how that happened and what it changed.
It was very exciting because it was in 1970, 1999 we realized that we could not buy the paper that we used to. It was the big company Kodak, Ilford, and they went bankrupt. So it was all finished. And then we realized you had to move over to a new system. Then we start to think about digitally making the pictures, but the cameras were not good enough at that time. So we realized that we could do them in scanning their images, with drum scanners. It took half an hour each to a little 35 millimeter shot was, and then we were able to invent a new language for ourselves, and we had this these professional people coming in to teach us how to do it, and they all wanted to be involved. They all say, put the coffee here and put the posters here. I want a Che Guevara on the wall here, and we're all making fantastic pictures. And they want to charge us 1,000 pounds a day. And then we started to learn very fast. And then we were able to invent ourselves. But all our art is done by. We are 3 people, that's it. We have George and Gilbert and Yue Gang, who is our assistant from China. That's all by.
I'm not sure whether Yue Gang is here this year.
We should have a big applause for him. Yeah, a big applause.
Yue Gang.
He also this year won the Best Looking Artist Assistant Award of the Year for the 16th consecutive year.
Now I had a few, before we open it up,
And it's quite exciting even because at that time everybody said, where are your assistants? They could never believe that we are making our pictures ourselves.
It's very important in that way that we don't want the pictures to look handmade, but in fact they are very, very handmade.
And we don't want a person behind our back. That's it. That's why we have to make them all. And it's a fantastic creativity. We managed to find a language and how to First we take the images. Like this summer we took maybe 10 or 20,000 new images for making new pictures, And then we make contact sheets of the new pictures. And then we have a studio full of books of new contact sheets, all in order, like in a dictionary, Leaves, people, outside, heads, legs, whatever you want, it's all there. So you open up all this contact sheet, and we go in there, choose, there is a computer number there, and then we go into the black room, where it's like, a black bag it is inside, where we make the pictures ourselves. We do the design first. They are 10% of the real piece, and that's the most creative part of us.
We're very excited because we can describe exactly in practical terms how the pictures come about, but it doesn't explain the great mystery of creating the pictures, which even we find difficult to explain. Even when we come down to the studio in the morning and look at the design we created the previous day, we can never recreate exactly how we arrived at that image. It is still a great mystery. And I suppose the nearest way of describing the creative experience is that it is similar in some way to when you are attracted romantically or sexually towards another person, and life is suddenly elevated, life is suddenly better and more colourful and more dramatic. And that's the elevated feeling we have when we're in the process of creating a picture. It's a strange, mysterious experience.
And we don't want to know too much.
So we never go to the studio with ideas or plans. If we went with ideas or plans, they would be things we know, that we already knew. We want to go to the studio to fall into some new truth that we hadn't thought about or felt before.
That could almost be a wonderful conclusion. I have a few last questions, and then we can open it up to all of you for questions or comments. One thing I wanted to ask you is, we've talked a lot about the many amazing works you've realized, and of course, in the exhibition there are so many of your works. We all can go and see the exhibition after the talk. We know very little about artists' unrealized projects. Architects always publish them, and they ultimately get things built by publishing unrealized works, but we know very little about artists' unrealized projects. Can you tell us about one or some of your projects which have not yet been realized?
Very few.
I'm not sure that we have any unrealized ones.
You mean the crypt that they...
That's one. Which
that's one he wants
Can
to
you
talk
tell us about that? Because that's extraordinary.
That was fantastic. We were truly baby artists, very, very inexperienced and very hopeful and very brave and probably quite arrogant. And we proposed a living sculpture for the Tate Gallery. And that would be a Christmas crib, or a nativity, I think they're called. Do you know these small models with is it Nazareth, the village?
Nazareth,
with the donkey, yes, and the baby Jesus. And we would create a life-size one in the foyer of the Tate Gallery with all the animals. We had a farmer friend who would organize that. And we would stand in as the two main figures. Yeah?
Adam and Steve.
And it was what our dealer would call prescient, no? Because there were no same-sex couples at that time. In that way, now they have.
Yeah, that's what
they
always says. You are prescient.
Yes.
Prescient. The artist as being prescient. Now, one other thing I think is interesting, and it's sort of, I was thinking about it this afternoon looking at the show, is memory is important, and we live in an age where we have more and more information, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we have more memory. It might be that amnesia is somewhere at the core, of this digital age, and I think artists also bring us back to memory, and I think in the exhibition there are many aspects of memory, and one thing which is particularly important is the memory of David Robilliard. I wanted us to somehow remember here the amazing poet and artist whose book was actually an amazing encounter for me when I visited you for the first time.
Yes.
Can you tell us about...
We should tell you.
I think we should talk in Stockholm about Robilliard and remember
just
him.
a brief memory, because it all started when we used to go, as in the 70s, to a wonderful club in Great Queen Street. It was wonderful to get into a taxi. So take us to Great Queen Street. And the club was called the Blitz. And it was a strange establishment. It was designed by some young people to appeal to middle-aged management class men who'd had war experience or national service. So the whole club was done up to look like wartime. The air raid siren went off every hour. The house wine was called Churchill's Choice. There were war posters all over the walls, and gas masks hanging up and things. And of course, nobody of that class would ever dream of going to the place. It was a total failure. And then one evening, a young couple called Biddy and Eve,
yes,
they came in and started to play the piano, but not playing war songs, but just playing nice modern things. And it took off, and it became the sort of pre-punk, crypto-crazy nightclub of great international fame. It was extraordinary. And we were there one evening, and a very, very glamorous, tall, blonde, beautiful young man had just joined the team as a waiter, and he came to our table and said, I'm so shy and embarrassed because I'm studying you at college, and now I see you in the real light. May I present you with a bottle of Côte d'Rhône? And he put the bottle down and left, but he didn't open the bottle, so he couldn't even... And that was Andrew Hurd, who died some years ago as well, and he introduced her to a friend of his, he was called David Roubiliard. He was a poet who became a painter from Guernsey. And he was, the two of them, we thought that we had lifetime friends. It never occurred to us that something would happen to change that. And like we said, we were told everything's going to get better. It did, and then HIV and AIDS came along. And so we lost David and
Yes,
Andrew.
but he has an amazing following all over the world still, David Roubiliard. The poetry and the painting are, there is a small show at the moment in New York. We are amazed at what you call, they are so, every young person is so excited by the, what you call, acid, you know, down to earth, but rigid and poetry.
It's amazing.
He has a following forever.
To look at the work now, and super interesting. The Moderna Museet just published this book with Etel Adnansward, and Etel talks about this bridge between poetry and art, which of course is so present in Roubiliard's work. So urgent to look at David Roubiliard. Now, another last question I wanted to ask you. There are many young artists here, and Rainer Maria Rilke wrote this lovely little book, which is an advice to a young poet. I was wondering what would in 2019 be your advice to a young artist?
Oh, I think that's very simple because we've always given the same advice in that situation. We would say that to a young artist, and we say it to ourselves and anyone who wants to create something. We say, tomorrow morning when you wake up, sit on the edge of the bed, keep your eyes closed, and don't go about your daily work until you've decided, what do I want to say to the world today? First, and then think. And the second piece of advice to the young art student is...
Fuck the teachers.
Gilbert and George, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe there's some questions?
We can now open it up, so maybe we can have some light and a microphone.
Yes, I have a microphone here, so please raise your hands, and you have to help me passing the mic on here. So.
Or if you speak loudly, I'm sure we can hear. Maybe nobody has a question. No questions?
Daniel?
I have a question.
Yeah.
When did you decide that each object, not only in this show, but that, thinking about photography, one would think that there are editions, but they're all unique?
Yes, of course. I think we wanted to be traditional artists in that way. We've always wanted to be conventional. We never wanted to be the artist the mother would be ashamed of. Didn't work out exactly like that, but our artworks, we wanted to be like the artists in the national galleries of the world, and they're always unique. Yeah?
But not only that, because they are so complex to make, that to make a second one would be very difficult. So that's why they are all unique, because they are very labored. They are very in every little thing. It's not an image. There are many, maybe the new ones have maybe like 50 or 10 or 20, 30, 40, 50 images. So it's all complex.
It's hard enough to sell one without trying to sell even more.
Do we have more questions? Yeah, we've got a question here. If you can have a
Speak up, I'm sure we can hear you.
I'd be happy if you speak in the microphone because
the mic
of the
is on its way. It's
documentation.
It's better for the recording, indeed, for the filming.
You were very defined about the taboos, social taboos. Do you call yourself a political artist as well, with your attitudes trying to go against the taboos in the society?
Well, we don't say we're political artists. We say that culture in a free society where you have a vote is culture is in advance of politics. A simple example is the government never changed the laws on child labour, and they would never have done that except for Dickens writing a book about it to put people to shame, and then the people in the population began to realise it was a bad thing, and then they make the government would never have a change to legislation. Culture first, politics afterwards.
Like
And
Oscar Wilde. No?
Yes,
He
Oscar
changed-
Wilde, yeah.
He changed everything,
Changed the world.
but he had to die for it. But he changed everything, and so that's what we believe. Artists are above that because we are moralists in some way.
So people might say that we're politically incorrect. They may be right, but we think we're correct politically.
There's more questions. There's a question here.
Hey, thank you for a nice Q&A. It was when you talked about the 5,000 editions that you sold. That came sort of right after speaking about...
Posters.
Posters.
Yeah.
Did I say posters? Or
Editions. So.
Oh, yeah.
Posters, yeah, good.
No, I was wondering how that, in terms of, you seem to have this view that about making it available day and night, so I would call it democratic.
Yes.
Democratic art, yes.
But the idea of the notion of selling 5,000 posters, how is that?
They were only £10 each, and they are signed by us, every single one.
I was sort of trying to get to the motivation behind it. Is it about making it available, democratic?
It means that kids who would never... 99% of the people who admire our pictures or go to our exhibitions have no idea that the pictures are for sale or what price they are. They follow it as art. Yeah.
So the whole idea to
posters.
sell all these posters to young people that cannot afford anything else, or even like the catalogs, they are very cheap. That's, for us, is a revolution.
We always tell the galleries to sell the catalogue for the same price as they paid the printer for it.
Because we are doing all the design, it's all done free by us. So the galleries only have to pay for the printer. And we size them all to make them easier to sell.
Also, in answer to this question, I think it's interesting. We once did together this publication, with Agnes B.
Oh, that was a revolution.
And the idea was to do an artist newspaper and poster in an edition of 200,000 copies, and give it away, for free all over the world. And it leads, of course, that art can pop up in different circuits. So then, a few years later, after your issue was published, I was in Japan, in a hotel room, and I switched on the TV, and there was a strange film. It was in Japanese. There was no translation. I didn't understand the word, but as a decor in the room of the film, there was your point d'ironie on the wall.
Fantastic.
So that's how art can travel unexpectedly, no?
Fantastic.
More questions?
I wonder.
Here.
Thank you for coming here. I wonder, has it been positive or negative for you for being a gay couple doing this kind of things? I'm gay myself. Do you think it's been?
We personally never used the term gay
or same-sex couple.
Since we discovered that it was used for female prostitutes. They were the gay ladies, yeah. So, and we don't believe in gay sex or straight sex or gay people. We think everyone is sexual, the same as plants are plants and trees are trees, and the animal kingdom is the animal kingdom. We don't have to.
We don't know exactly where we are, but we could be anywhere with sexuality.
We always say that we must be right, because you hear somebody in a bar would say, "I feel horny tonight." It's quite a common thing. Or you never hear somebody say, "I feel hetero horny tonight." Never. Or, "I feel homo horny." Nobody would say that. Eh? You're just horny.
Thanks.
And that's just the girls.
Got a question here in the second row in the middle. If you can have the microphone, please.
Thank you so much, Gilbert George. I have a question about the titles of the series of works you make, and
Which
what
one?
comes first. So the work comes first, and then you come up with a title, or you come up with this iconic phrase, or
That's quite a mystery in a way. We're never sure what we're doing. No, we don't believe that somebody who knows how to do something is very good at doing it. We think all of the great novels are written by novelists who didn't really know how to write it. They're just able to do it in that way. So sometimes the title is there, but not known to us before the pictures. Maybe it emerges during or after. It's all a great mystery.
But the title makes itself in the end. That's it. We know it.
It's got to have it. Just
we
as
don't know where we go when we make pictures, because we could go anywhere. No? But in the end, when we have the whole pictures are finished, no, we know the title. That's it.
We've just begun to make a new group of pictures, which we're very excited by.
Yes.
We can't tell you the title because that hasn't emerged yet. Although maybe it has and we're not telling you. But we can give you 2 clues, because we'll give you 2 of the titles which point a little to the direction the pictures are taking. One is called Darwin Day, which of course doesn't exist until now, and the other is called Bedwetting.
And the other one is called Full Fig.
Full Fig. And another one is called Date Rape. Does anyone know the date of date rape? When did that come into existence first? In print or in court? 1983. 1983, very interesting. We found other ways of saying it without that before that. No, we're going down this road with the pictures, and we're looking straight ahead without thinking, without feeling, without hearing. And of course, you don't feel what's underfoot then, yeah?
But
so whether there are chippings or big rocks or small rocks, we don't know. We're going down that dodgy road.
But they feels like we are walking into a magic land in some way, where the flowers are very big, the people are very small. Alice in Wonderland in some way. Very acid, very what they call magical in some way.
We like it when our young friends look at the designs and say, "What are you on?" Or they pay us the ultimate compliment when people a third of our age say, "You guys are crazy." We love that.
Thank you so much, Gilbert and George. I wanted to ask you about the video works. You made a series of video works in the early 70s. How did they come about, and have you ever thought about making more?
That came about because of the late Gary Schum, who ran the video gallery in Düsseldorf. In fact, it was a little bit fake, because you couldn't make video like he wanted to make it. So he did it as film, and then it was transferred to video. But it was supposed to be a video gallery. And we did one first called The Nature of Our Looking, which was all about us. In the nature, before we were told to fuck off as old cunts. and then we entered the modern urban world, and we did 3 triptych of videos. One was called In the Bush.
The portrait of a young man.
Portrait of
the artist, a young man. And Gordon Makes Us Drunk. That was another one.
Gordon's Makes Us Drunk was very exciting, because the moment it was released, our gallery received a telephone call from Gordon's Gin to say they were very excited that young, trendy artists were doing something to do with Gordon's Gin, because the average age of the consumers of Gordon's Gin was getting quite
70.
old, and they wanted to start introducing Gordon's Gin to a younger audience, and they thought trendy young artists, swinging on, they would do the trick. So I told the gallery to say that they needn't bother, yes? And then they called back again, and they sent flowers, and they sent someone around. They were very, very keen to involve themselves in modern trendy artists and Gordon's Gin. So they made so many advances to us and to the gallery that in the end I said to the dealer, just send them a copy of the tape around. So a copy of the tape was sent round to them. We didn't hear a word after that.
There's also
the best is the world of Gilbert George.
81, because
from
that's
81.
everything.
That is
everything.
extraordinary. That is designed by us. It's 90-minute film, and it's like a total cosmology of ourselves from the beginning to the end. And here we have the first time interviews by ordinary people. We went out in the street and took them in and asked them about their life. Is it worth living and all the stuff? They gave this amazing responses. It's just so tragic and at the same time so beautiful. That's the best film we ever did. And we just digitalized it this year and improved the color in some parts. and it's extraordinary.
That started when you met in Greece, a teenager.
Oh yes,
right?
we met a young American boy who followed us or became.
He said he wanted to become a movie director, and then he said he would like to make a film with us, but he wanted to know what would the film be, what would it be about? And we said we wanted to be about everything we could think about, feel about, hope we would not leave anything out. We would try to be entirely inclusive, to make it jam full of everything. And it's a movie that does stand the test of time. It's a very, very beautiful movie. But in general, it's very difficult as artists to make videos because you have to invite people and they don't. Pictures on the wall are so simple and so.
Videos take up a whole room. Yeah. And it's very difficult, because you cannot have 10 videos in one room because the noise would be impossible. You cannot follow it, so you have to have one only. It takes up too many rooms. So even we got our language, our big format, the rectangle or square, are so simple and so direct, in your face. That's it.
And I think that is the absolutely perfect transition, I think, now for all of us to go and see the pictures on the wall. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.